Welcome to Diplomacy and International Relations by Bastian Freiburg. Just a quick heads up before we get started. This deep dive is generated with AI, but rest assured, all the information we'll be covering has been carefully verified.
And today we're diving into something pretty fundamental, really. It's this shift in, well, how societies hold together the decline in social connections, in civic engagement.
Right.
And this isn't just some academic idea. It has real ripple effects. You see it in international relations, the overall health of democracies globally, and, even in national politics, like in Denmark, for instance.
Okay, let's unpack that. I mean, the groundwork for a lot of this discussion, it was really laid by Robert Putnam in Bowling Alone, wasn't it?
Absolutely. He was the one who really highlighted that massive drop in people joining things, social activities across the U.S., especially from the mid-20th century onward.
Fewer bowling leagues, fewer clubs, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Less community involvement overall. And crucially, this wasn't just about hobbies. No, this decline in social participation, it went pretty much hand in hand with a drop in how much people were actually engaging civically in their local communities, in politics, the whole picture.
Which paints such a different scene from, say, 19th century America.
Oh, completely different.
Our sources talk about this really strong spirit of optimism back then,
yeah.
but it wasn't just like wishful thinking.
No, it was grounded. Grounded in this really dense web of social connections, local schools, churches, trade unions, all sorts of civic societies.
Community life sounds like it was just buzzing, really active.
It does, and that contrast, between that vibrant community life, really fueled by connections, and the more fragmented picture today is striking.
Yeah.
So the mission for us in this deep dive is to really get into this complex issue of declining social capital. Now, a lot of our source material focuses on the US and the UK, that's true, but the core themes, social bonds, civic participation, they're absolutely key when you think about international relations, global politics, and even the specifics of Danish politics, where that strong social trust is often seen as so vital.
So we want to understand what's driving the decline.
Exactly. And what roles different players, governments, corporations might have in maybe turning things around.
Okay, let's start with the state then. There's this big question, isn't there? Should governments actively try to rebuild community life?
Yeah.
What are the arguments for that?
Well, one viewpoint is that the state can be like a crucial civic investor.
How so?
Think about government funding for the arts, local festivals, national grants, public broadcasting like PBS or NPR in the States.
Ah, okay. Things that bring people together.
Precisely. They create shared cultural moments, experiences that can foster a sense of collective identity, a bit of social glue.
That makes sense. Those shared experiences can build belonging.
Yeah.
And then there's that other idea, the one about repurposing buildings.
Yeah, that's a fascinating one. Taking existing infrastructure, maybe struggling shopping malls or buildings that aren't used much anymore, old churches, empty downtown shops.
And turning them into what?
Into community hubs, places offering a whole mix of things. Maybe small business incubators, social services, makerspaces with shared tools, nonprofit offices, rec centers, even just like community coffee spots or public living rooms.
Public living rooms. I like that. Places to just be without having to buy something.
Exactly. Addressing that need for informal social interaction. And think about the potential synergy there.
Synergy.
Yeah, different groups bumping into each other. Maybe the makerspace folks connect with the local ham radio club, leading to new ideas, stronger networks overall.
But it's not clear-cut, is it? The state's role. There's a real debate. Some say yes, government support. Others want a much more hands-off approach.
That's the core tension, absolutely. On one side, you have people arguing the state needs to actively fund community centers, support local projects.
And the other side?
The other side suggests, well, maybe the state should actually pull back. Some argue for abolishing welfare, for instance, believing that communities will form more organically if people need to rely on each other more.
Right. The idea that depending on the state might weaken those natural horizontal ties between neighbors.
That's the logic. If the state provides the safety net, maybe there's less incentive to build those mutual support systems yourself. But, there's a counter argument. This decline in community third places, it's relatively recent, right? States have been around forever.
Good point.
And one source even points to the New Deal era in the U.S. Huge state intervention during the Depression, but also a time of really strong local organizations. Maybe shared struggle brought people together then.
So it's not a simple equation. More state equals weaker community.
Don't seem like it. It's more nuanced. Which brings us to the perspective that the state's role should be, well, more limited.
Limited.
Some argue the state's main job is just to protect the right to associate freely, get rid of barriers that stop people connecting. But the government shouldn't be actively creating associations or deciding what a meaningful life looks like.
Just ensure the conditions are right.
Kind of. And related to that is the idea of the state investing in public spaces, parks, libraries, plazas, places people can gather without needing to spend money. Tackling that death of third places idea again.
Yeah, providing the physical space for interaction.
Exactly. Though we also have to acknowledge the argument that the state itself can sometimes be divisive.
How so?
Well, intentionally or not, state policies can sometimes deepen political or social divides, actually working against community cohesion.
That's a sobering thought. The institution meant to serve everyone, potentially pulling them apart.
And it makes you question whether the state, just by how it manages or doesn't manage public space, is always either helping or hindering those social bonds.
Even things like tax breaks.
Right. One source points out that technically every tax-exempt church in the U.S. is state-sponsored in a way. It's all quite tangled.
It's a very tangled web. Okay, what about the other big players? Corporations. How do they fit into this picture of declining social capital?
Well, there's a pretty strong argument emerging that corporations, especially big tech companies, carry quite a bit of responsibility here.
For weakening social ties?
Yeah. The criticism is that their business models often put profit way ahead of societal well-being. They create these online spaces that can feel isolating, maybe even superficial, rather than fostering genuine, deep connections.
That feeling of being always online but still feeling alone.
That's it, exactly. And then there's the idea that societies become more litigious, maybe partly because of technology, constant recording, online scrutiny.
Making people afraid to just interact casually.
Potentially, yeah. A fear of misspeaking, being misinterpreted, facing some kind of online pile-on. It could definitely put a chill on spontaneous social interactions.
It's funny, though. There seems to be this frustration that corporate actions are hurting communities, but also, in some circles, a real resistance to letting the government step in to fix it.
That's a paradox our sources definitely highlight. People see the problem caused by corporate behavior, but they're hesitant to give the government more power to regulate or counteract it. Often comes down to, philosophical views about government intervention in the free market.
So are companies likely to change course on their own? For the greater good?
The consensus seems to be. Probably not. Not without pressure anyway. Either from unions pushing for worker well-being or from government holding them accountable for their broader social impact.
Right. Okay, let's pivot a bit. Let's talk about the actual factors contributing to this decline. It feels like a perfect storm of different trends.
It really does. One huge factor seems to be just the basic economics of life, the rising cost of living, combined with a really demanding work culture.
People are just stretched too thin.
Exactly. Longer hours, maybe longer commutes. It just leaves less time, less energy to invest in your local community, go to meetings, volunteer.
Makes complete sense. If you're just trying to keep your head above water, joining the PTA might not be top of the list.
Precisely. And tied into that is this idea that society's focus on, the free market, the profit motive above all else, that can clash with older values of community, of mutual support.
The hustle culture versus neighborliness.
Kind of. That constant pressure, what one source called a transactional, mercenary approach to life, can really wear away at those informal, supportive connections.
And just the stress of modern life. Things like healthcare, taxes. Our sources mentioned civic arthritis.
Yeah, civic arthritis, it's a great phrase. The mental load of just navigating these incredibly complex systems, it can absolutely lead to people disengaging from civic life.
Feeling overwhelmed.
Totally overwhelmed. And some argue that even well-meaning government programs, say in healthcare, can have unintended side effects, rising costs, administrative nightmares that just add to that feeling.
We also hear a lot about rugged individualism, especially in places like the U.S. That probably doesn't help build community either.
No, a strong cultural focus on individualism, plus that tendency towards seeing interactions as transactions, it can definitely discourage deeper connections. And of course, we can't ignore the pull of more solitary activities.
Like social media, video games.
Social media, gaming, streaming TV. They offer connection or entertainment, sure, but they often replace face-to-face time.
It's easier, right? Scrolling your phone versus making the effort to go meet people.
Often feels that way. And Putnam, back in Bowling Alone, he listed a whole slew of factors, didn't he?
You did. What were some of those again?
Let's see, more time pressure from work, economic hard times, more women entering the paid workforce, people moving house more often, suburban sprawl, the rise of TV and the whole electronic revolution, changes in how the economy works, shifts in marriage and family. It was a long list.
Wow, a confluence of massive societal shifts.
Absolutely. Fundamentally, it points towards this move away from shared local activities towards more individualized stuff, often happening online, which maybe just doesn't build the same strong bonds.
And Putnam also really flagged generational change, didn't
Yeah.
he? As a major driver.
A huge driver, yes. Different generations just seem to connect and participate in different ways, and that accounts for a big chunk of the decline. Plus, more recently, say since the 80s, you've got things like anti-union laws, globalized labor markets.
Pushing people out of old associations.
Exactly. While at the same time, these easier, often passive online alternatives just keep multiplying.
Okay, let's shift gear again. Modern political engagement, it just feels different now, doesn't it?
It really does. There's this concept, hyperpolitics.
Hyperpolitics.
Yeah, it's used to describe a kind of politicization that's very individualistic, often focused on the short term, and maybe lacks the sort of collective weight or value that 20th century civic action had.
So lots of noise online, maybe, but not the same collective action.
Kind of. Think about how quickly online outrage flares up and dies down, or the focus on individual expression in digital activism. Compare that to the long, slow, collective work of traditional political organizing.
Right. Online activism feels more fluid.
Ephemeral.
Exactly. Like the internet itself, you get these swarms of individuals coalescing around an issue, but it's not quite the same as stable, long-term community building through, say, a party or a union.
One source made a really interesting point about the left versus the right in this landscape, challenges in building culture.
Yeah, the argument goes that the right can often operate more easily within the kind of social structures that capitalism naturally creates.
It has an advantage there.
Potentially. Whereas the left often faces the bigger task of actively building a counterculture, something separate from the dominant one.
And then there's the far-right project we see, focusing on boundaries and the state.
Yes, the goal there often seems to be about reinforcing boundaries, using history to draw lines between us and them. The state is seen as this biopolitical agent.
Focused on identification politics, basically. Sorting and classifying people.
And this doesn't always mean, like, a total revolution.
Not necessarily. Often these movements can work within the existing system just by expanding what they call zones of internal exclusion.
Like detention centers, stricter border controls.
Things like that, without tearing down the whole structure. And they often have strong grassroots support churches, charities, online forums backing them up.
Which contrasts with the left, where civil society seems more fragmented.
That's the assessment in some sources. Even with lots of activist groups focused on specific issues, there isn't always that same kind of unified, nationwide network you might see on the right.
Leading to a politics of resistance.
Yeah, where the focus becomes more about pushing back against the state, maybe because actually wielding state power feels more remote.
And we're seeing traditional parties decline too, right? Across Europe.
Membership is definitely down for many traditional mass parties, left and right. Although in the U.S. context, it's worth remembering, they never really had mass parties in quite the same European way, at least not since the late 1800s.
Which brings up Prinoworski's dilemma, that challenge for left parties.
Right. How do you broaden your appeal beyond the traditional working class without losing that core support? It's a constant balancing act they've faced throughout history.
Trying to appeal to farmers, the middle class, the people, more broadly.
Exactly. Often involving a kind of populist shift in rhetoric.
So the big question then, can online engagement actually replace that declining traditional social capital?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We're still figuring it out. Online communities are easy to join, easy to leave.
Lower stakes.
Much lower stakes. The connections might not be as deep or as lasting as those you build in a face-to-face group where leaving has real social consequences.
And people are talking about post-fascism now as something different from the 20th century version.
Yeah, it's one term being used. It points to maybe more atomized, volatile right-wing movements, still focused on limiting citizenship, reinforcing borders, but maybe lacking that highly organized mass mobilization aspect of historical fascism.
So maybe comparisons to the 1930s aren't always the most helpful.
Some argue not. They suggest looking at other historical moments, like Marx's analysis of 1848 France, focusing on things like private debt, the relationship between debtors and creditors. That might actually be more relevant to today's politics.
Interesting. The idea being that focusing only on a fascist frame might actually overestimate the left's strength today and distract from the bigger picture of, well, political disengagement generally.
That's definitely a concern raised, which brings us back nicely to the core concept, social capital itself. Let's pin down that definition.
Okay, so our sources define it as basically the connections between people, social networks, and the trust and reciprocity that grow out of them.
Exactly. It's not just the institutions themselves, but the glue that holds them together.
Good glue. I like that.
And it feeds itself, right? Trust builds more trust. When you have good experiences relying on people, you become more likely to trust others generally. That leads to generalized reciprocity, doing something for someone without expecting something back immediately, but having the sort of background confidence that down the line, someone will probably do something for you. A sense of mutual obligation.
So it underpins that feeling of community support. And there's a difference between thick and thin trust.
Yes. Thick trust is for the people you know really well, family, close friends, colleagues you see all the time. It's personal, embedded in strong ties.
And thin trust.
That's the trust you extend to strangers, people you don't know personally. It still relies on shared norms and that expectation of reciprocity, but it's broader, less personal, essential for, complex societies to function.
Okay, and what builds that trust? What are the key ingredients?
3 main things pop up. Trustworthiness itself, people being reliable, having integrity, reciprocity, that give and take, and networks, the actual structures that allow people to interact repeatedly.
So getting involved in the community is pretty key then.
Absolutely. Joining things, whether it's a choir, a residents association, even old-style groups like burial societies, it all forces interaction, improves communication, helps people learn to cooperate. That's how you build social capital.
And why do people join in the first place?
All sorts of reasons. Just enjoying the activity, needing social contact, wanting to fix a local problem, seeing a clear benefit for themselves, or just believing they can actually make a difference by getting involved.
Religious groups have historically been huge for this, right?
Massively important. People involved in congregations often show higher levels of civic engagement generally. They tend to have bigger, more diverse social networks, especially in, say, African-American communities. Faith groups have been absolutely central, though, as we noted, church membership is falling in some places.
And what about these types? The moshers and the schmoozers?
Yeah. Moshers are the doers, the organizers within formal groups, the ones who really make things happen.
And schmoozers?
They're active in the informal stuff conversations, casual relationships, networking. Both are vital to this social fabric, just in different ways. Interestingly, research shows being part of these networks is a better predictor of volunteering or donating money than just having generally altruistic feelings.
So connection drive action. What about bigger social movements?
The links may be a bit less direct, but grassroots movements definitely can build social capital. They forge new identities, create new networks among people who might not have otherwise connected. And education level seems to be a pretty strong predictor too, especially for joining formal organizations.
And this isn't just about feeling good, is it? There are tangible benefits to high social capital.
Oh, absolutely. More and more research links strong community connections to better health, more wealth, even sort of collective wisdom communities being better at solving problems together.
How does that work?
Well, it lowers the friction of social life, right? If there's trust, transactions are easier, people are more aware of how their actions affect others. It even seems to help people cope better with trauma, fight illness, real psychological and biological effects.
So stronger communities are literally healthier communities.
Seems that way, and they're more resilient. In neighborhoods with strong ties, people rely on each other. They can use social pressure, moral suasion to deal with local issues.
And it's good for kids, too.
Consistently linked to better outcomes for children. Healthier births, lower teen pregnancy, fewer dropouts, less crime, lower rates of premature death. It's quite remarkable.
Wow.
Conversely, a lack of social capital makes problems like poverty or unemployment even worse. It removes that buffer, that support system. Even street gangs, in a way, can be seen as a distorted form of social capital when positive alternatives aren't there.
And there's an economic link, too.
Yes, quite a few studies link higher social capital measured by things like trust levels directly to better economic growth. Trust is good for business, it seems.
It really touches everything. And our sources had some simple ways to gauge this, just basic questions.
Yeah, things like, Do you know your neighbors' names? Go to local events. Volunteer. Do you trust the police? Know your senators. Go to church. Sign petitions. Feel like local leaders care. Feel like you can make a difference. How often do you see friends or family? Simple stuff, but indicative.
And then there are bigger surveys, like that benchmark survey.
Right, the Social Capital Community Benchmark Survey. That looks at multiple dimensions. Trust, political engagement, giving and volunteering, faith involvement, informal socializing, group memberships, civic leadership, how diverse people's friendships are, and whether participation is equal across different groups.
And that survey showed patterns, like geographical ones.
It often does. For instance, in the U.S., higher social capital tends to show up more in northern states, lower in the South, and there's a strong correlation between high social capital states and states where kids generally do better. Also, places with lots of associations tend to have more public meetings, higher voter turnout, more nonprofits. It all connects.
Okay, let's zoom in on the UK now. What's the picture there? Similar declines.
Well, yes and no. There's definitely evidence of decline in some traditional areas, working men's clubs, unions, religious groups, that sort of thing. Similar to the U.S., and it coincides with the rise of social media.
Wow.
But perhaps surprisingly, overall generalized social trust in the U.K. has actually gone up recently, reached its highest point since the early 80s, apparently. Ranks pretty well internationally, too, and the increase seems to be across the board, age, income, region.
That is interesting, a counter trend almost. What about COVID? How did that impact things in the UK?
It seems to have been complex. On the one hand, there were reports of more informal volunteering, people checking on neighbors, more meaningful chats. Some research even hints it might have boosted national unity a bit, maybe even led to lasting increases in trust. But, experiences varied a lot internationally.
And UK governments have tried to boost social capital before, haven't they?
Oh, yes. There have been various initiatives over the years. Active citizenship back in the Thatcher era, a speaker's commission on it, interest in communitarianism, the New Deal for Communities. The idea has been around Whitehall.
But maybe not always front and center.
Often not, especially in the big economic ministries. Despite all the evidence linking it to growth and well-being, it sometimes gets overlooked. Though it did get a mention in the recent leveling up plans.
And sometimes other policies can hurt it unintentionally.
Exactly, like the trend towards larger secondary schools, which can also become more segregated by wealth that might unintentionally weaken local social ties built through smaller, more local schools.
But university seems to help. Graduates report higher social capital.
They do, yeah. Significantly higher trust levels. The thinking is that the whole residential university experience, living closely with others, building networks in that high trust environment, has a lasting positive effect.
So thinking about policy in the UK, what kinds of things could actually help build social capital?
Well, sources suggest things at different scales. Micro-level stuff, like making it easier for older people to move nearer to family, maybe changes to property taxes like stamp duty or a right to move in social housing.
Okay, practical things. What about the meso level?
Community level.
Supporting community development more strategically, maybe mapping local areas, not just for economic data, but for social capital measures too. Mapping where civil society groups are active, perhaps revisiting programs that support community organizers.
And housing.
Promoting things like co-housing could help. And maybe using subsidies for business networks, not just for business advice, but specifically to create peer groups, build trust and knowledge sharing there.
And at the macro, national level.
Tackling the trust problem head on, helping people figure out who and what is trustworthy. Maybe designing welfare systems differently so they don't automatically signal distrust towards citizens, assuming honesty first, perhaps.
Interesting.
And also consciously nurturing shared experiences and common values through national events, popular culture, media, trying to build that sense of shared identity. So the takeaway is, social capital matters. A lot, but it's often neglected.
That seems to be the bottom line. It's crucial for the economy, for social mobility, for well-being, but it doesn't always get the attention it deserves in policymaking.
Well, this has certainly been a really comprehensive look at a complex issue. We've touched on so many factors changing social capital and civic life, the state, corporations, our own behaviors.
It's a big puzzle.
It is. And while, yes, our sources focus mainly on the U.S. and UK, these underlying principles, connection, trust, participation, they're clearly vital for international relations, for healthy democracies everywhere, including here in Denmark. Understanding this is just so important in our connected world.
Absolutely crucial.
So a final thought for you, our listener. Thinking about everything we've discussed, all these different angles, What single policy or maybe societal shift do you think could make the biggest positive difference in rebuilding social capital where you live, in your community, your nation? Definitely something to mull over. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into diplomacy and international relations.
Yes, thank you for listening.
And if you found this conversation valuable, please do consider following the podcast and maybe leave us a 5-star rating. It genuinely helps us reach more people.